The flight attendant's voice rang out across the cabin, sharp and smug. "Ma'am, you're in the wrong seat. First class isn't open for upgrades." Avery Johnson looked up, calm but unyielding. "This is my seat," she replied, holding out a perfectly valid boarding pass. But the slap came before the truth did. In front of an entire cabin of silent onlookers, Avery was humiliated. No one knew she wasn't just another passenger. No one guessed what was about to unfold. Because the woman they just dismissed, she didn't just buy the ticket. She owned the plane. And that was only her first secret. Avery Johnson stepped onto the jet bridge with a calm composure, her polished heels clicking softly on the metal ramp. The air smelled of leather, jet fuel, and the faint scent of citrus from the cleaning crew that had just finished tidying the first-class cabin. She adjusted the strap of her slim black carry-on, her blazer pristine, her blouse crisp, her diamond-studded earrings subtle but elegant. She looked like someone who belonged exactly where she was headed, but not everyone saw it that way. Inside the cabin, soft, ambient music played above the hush of murmured conversations and the clinking of glasses. A row of sleek, cream leather seats gleamed under the golden lighting, and a neatly dressed couple was already sipping champagne near the front. The older gentleman glanced up briefly from his newspaper but returned to it without comment. His wife, her fingers twitching around a monogrammed clutch, glanced at Avery with a small, tight smile that never reached her eyes. Avery offered a nod and smile as she walked past, her ticket already in hand. Her seat was 1A, front row, window. She had chosen it for the view, not because she needed the legroom or prestige. She already had more of both than most people on this plane could imagine. "Good afternoon," Avery said softly as she reached the flight attendant waiting at the first-class entrance. Tracy Sullivan, the lead flight attendant, didn't smile. She was in her early 40s, hair in a slick bun, makeup sharp and deliberate. Her name tag gleamed. Her posture was military-level upright. "Boarding pass, please," she said, her tone efficient, almost curt. Avery handed it over without hesitation. Tracy's eyes scanned it quickly, then again, slower this time. Her brow furrowed. "Seat 1A?" she asked, tone dropping by a fraction. "Are you sure this is correct?" "Yes," Avery replied evenly, not rising to the condescension. "That's my seat." Tracy looked at her again, this time from head to toe, not at the boarding pass, at her skin, her face, her natural hair swept into a low bun, at the perfectly tailored clothes that somehow didn't register as designer enough for her standards, at Avery's calm expression, unreadable and unimpressed by scrutiny. "I'm going to need to recheck this," Tracy said, already turning toward the galley. Avery didn't move. "The code on the bottom confirms it's a first-class fare, fully paid." "Yes, but sometimes there are errors," Tracy said, voice clipped, without turning around. "You may want to wait aside while I clarify." Passengers nearby began to notice the exchange. The businessman across the aisle, white, late 50s, sharp navy suit, lowered his tablet slightly. The older woman, 2 rows back, adjusted her seat, leaning just enough to eavesdrop. Someone further down stifled a chuckle, not necessarily mean-spirited, just entertained by the unexpected delay. Avery stood tall, still clutching her carry-on. Her tone didn't waver. "With respect, I'd like to take my seat now." Tracy turned back, lips pressed into a thin line. "Miss Johnson." "Yes, Miss Johnson. If you'll just be patient, I need to confirm that this seat is indeed assigned to you. We've had situations before, people booking economy and assuming upgrades apply automatically. I'm sure you understand." There it was, the assumption, the performance of procedure masking the sting of a silent verdict. "You don't look like someone who belongs here." Avery met her gaze directly. "I do understand. I understand very well." Another beat of silence stretched between them, thick with everything unspoken. Then Avery stepped past Tracy and gently slid her carry-on into the overhead bin above seat 1A. She sat down slowly, crossing her legs, adjusting her sleeve with precision. Calm, poised, unshaken. Tracy's mouth opened, but she said nothing. She turned stiffly and walked back toward the front galley. Avery leaned her head back and exhaled slowly. Around her, whispers were beginning. "That was odd," someone murmured. Maybe she's a last-minute upgrade, said another. A woman in oversized sunglasses whispered to her partner, "Did you see the attendant's face? She looked ready to explode." But no one said anything to Avery. Not yet. From her seat, Avery could feel the shift, the subtle crackle of judgment rippling through the cabin. It was quiet, yes, but loud in the way judgment always is when it's unspoken. She pulled out her phone, checked her emails, scanned a briefing for an upcoming board meeting, typed a quick message, nothing dramatic, just procedural. One line, Flight 1286, boarding resistance noted, will advise if escalates. The recipient was saved under just an initial. R. She put her phone away. 5 rows back, a man in coach leaned into the aisle to glimpse first class. Avery caught his eye by accident. He blinked and quickly looked away. In the galley, Tracy was whispering something to another flight attendant. Emma Collins. Much younger, fresher, clearly newer to this world. Emma kept glancing toward Avery's seat, her face unsure. Tracy, on the other hand, looked certain. Her expression said it all. This wasn't just a mistake in seating. This was, to her, a matter of misplaced status. The murmur in the cabin didn't die down. If anything, it grew subtler, sharper, like the hum of electricity before a storm. Avery sat quietly in her seat, legs crossed, hands resting lightly on her lap. The tray table in front of her remained closed. She hadn't touched a thing. But inside, she was timing everything. She knew this game. She'd lived it more times than she could count. From the galley, Tracy returned, her heels clicking in rhythm, a printed manifest in hand. Her jaw was set, her eyes narrow. "Miss Johnson," she said, pausing just before Avery's row. "I've reviewed our list. Your name is listed, but I don't see any notations authorizing a first-class seat. Perhaps you booked incorrectly." Avery didn't flinch. "I didn't. It's a fully paid fare, purchased directly." Tracy didn't budge. "That may be, but the manifest doesn't show any additional remarks or VIP status attached to your name. We reserve these seats for specific customers under that category." "I'm not aware that quiet compliance and a valid ticket require further annotations," Avery said, still calm. Tracy's lips curled slightly. "Well, typically, passengers with your situation book through corporate channels. Sometimes things fall through." "Is my seat invalid?" Avery asked simply. Tracy paused, flustered for a beat. "It's under review." Avery tilted her head. "That's not a category listed on your website." From 2 rows back, the businessman in the navy suit, David Brooks, folded his hands over his briefcase and cleared his throat. His gray-streaked hair was neatly combed, and his tailored jacket said he flew like this often. He looked at Tracy, then at Avery, then back at Tracy. "I'm sure it's just a mistake," he said, voice neutral. "But if it's not properly annotated, maybe a quick verification wouldn't hurt." Avery turned slightly in her seat, meeting his gaze, calm, direct, no malice. "I've already verified it, sir," she said. "Twice." David gave a polite, diplomatic smile. "Still, the crew needs to maintain order. These days, protocol matters." "Even if protocol is misused?" Avery asked. That made him pause. Before he could answer, Tracy gestured to Emma, the junior flight attendant who had been standing near the service cart, clearly uncomfortable with the exchange. "Emma, bring me the tablet," she ordered. Emma moved quickly, handing over the device that held the live passenger data. Tracy scrolled, then handed it to Emma without a word. Emma looked at the screen, her eyes scanned, line by line. "Row 1A, Johnson, Avery, first class. No special notes, nothing out of the ordinary. But also, no flags, no designations. Nothing to indicate Avery's full status." Emma hesitated. "She's listed properly," she said, quiet but clear. "First-class ticket paid in full. It's not an upgrade." Tracy's expression hardened. "Still no profile tag?" "No," Emma said, glancing again. "But that's not uncommon with some private bookings." Tracy dismissed the comment with a scoff. "Well, without authorization from above, I can't confirm her eligibility." Avery's voice was like steel wrapped in silk. "Eligibility?" David shifted slightly in his seat, tension settling in his shoulders. "Ma'am," he said to Avery now, his tone still polished but carrying the weight of suggestion. "I'm sure it's not personal. It's just policy. They have to be thorough." Avery looked at him, not angry, just disappointed. "Would they be this thorough if I looked like you?" David blinked. He didn't answer. Around them, the silence grew thicker. Emma stepped forward again, her voice slightly bolder. "It's still your assigned seat, ma'am. Unless we're told otherwise, you have every right to remain where you are." Tracy glared at her. "Emma, step back." Emma did, but not without a final glance at Avery, a quiet apology in her eyes. Tracy turned back to Avery. "Until this is cleared, I'll need you to move to the back, temporarily." Avery didn't move. David sighed. "It's just a formality, Miss Johnson, was it? You can always move back once it's settled." He meant it as reassurance, but it landed like a verdict. Avery looked at him for a long moment, the kind of silence that demanded reflection. Then she turned to Tracy. "I'll stay here. You're refusing a direct request from the crew?" "I'm declining an unjustified demotion disguised as policy," she replied. "And as your colleague just confirmed, my seating is valid." Tracy's hand twitched at her side. David raised his brows, then finally said, "Well, rules are rules." That was the moment. The twist. The moment when hope briefly rising in the audience's chest took a dip. The man who looked like he'd step in, who looked like a logical ally, chose neutrality disguised as compliance. And that compliance tilted toward the comfortable status quo. Tracy nodded, almost satisfied. "I'll escalate this," she said. "Don't get too comfortable, Miss Johnson." Avery leaned back slightly, crossing her arms, not defensive, but firm. "I never get too comfortable," she said softly. "Not in places like this." The engines roared as the plane lifted into the clouds. The usual thrill of takeoff dulled by tension still lingering in the first-class cabin. Avery sat upright, hands folded in her lap, her seatbelt fastened across her waist. She didn't look left or right. She didn't lean back in comfort or sip from the champagne others were now being served. She simply waited. Across the aisle, David Brooks scrolled on his tablet, occasionally glancing her way, more with curiosity than guilt. And a few rows back, whispers buzzed like low static, the kind that fills a space when something socially uncomfortable has happened, and no one knows how to process it out loud. Tracy moved through the aisle with a practiced smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, pouring bubbly into glass flutes for the Whitakers, an older couple that Tracy had greeted earlier like royalty. "Let me know if you need anything else," she said, her tone warm, eyes twinkling. Mrs. Whitaker nodded graciously. "Thank you, dear. It's always lovely flying with you." "Always a pleasure to serve you," Tracy replied sweetly. Then she turned. Her smile vanished before she reached Avery's row. She didn't stop. She didn't ask. She didn't offer even water. Just walked past. Avery didn't say a word, but her eyes followed Tracy as she breezed down the aisle to coach, where even passengers in row 12 were getting drinks. Emma, the junior attendant, noticed. She hesitated, half lifted a bottle from the cart, but paused when she caught Tracy's sharp glare from across the cabin. Emma slowly set the bottle back down and busied herself with cutlery. Avery remained composed, but her posture, ramrod straight, spoke louder than words. She wasn't surprised. She was documenting, mentally recording every moment. She didn't need confrontation. She needed clarity, precision, proof. From behind her, a voice whispered, not particularly quietly, "Some people just can't accept their place." The voice belonged to a woman in pearls and a Chanel cardigan. Her tone was casual, like commenting on a menu. Her husband gave a small grunt of agreement. Avery heard it, but she didn't turn around. It wasn't new. It wasn't shocking. It was just another line in a tired script she'd heard all her life. Then Tracy returned, this time carrying a tray of chilled water. Her steps were confident, her head held high. She served David first, then the Whitakers again, even though their flutes were still half full. A younger couple in 2C and 2D got a pour. smiling up at her with mild amusement, clearly unaware or uninterested in the subtext unfolding only feet away. Then she arrived at Avery's seat. She didn't stop. Instead, as she passed, her hip subtly shifted, her elbow tipped, and the tray tilted, just enough. A full glass of water spilled over the edge, cascading directly into Avery's lap. It soaked her slacks, cold and unmistakable. Gasps came from behind. A few people sat up straighter. Others turned to look. "Oh!" Tracy feigned surprise, placing a hand dramatically to her chest. "You need to watch where you're sitting, Miss Johnson." Avery looked down at her soaked legs, then up, slowly, at Tracy. Their eyes met, and for the first time, something flickered behind Avery's calm. Not rage, not panic. Calculation. Deliberate. Focused. Emma, standing at the other end of the aisle, took a small step forward. "Do you want me to bring towels?" Tracy waved her off. "She's fine. It's just water." Avery took a napkin from the seat pocket, calmly dabbing the worst of the spill without comment. David Brooks glanced over his shoulder, uncertain. He made a move as if to offer his napkin, then stopped. Reconsidered. Stayed silent. The woman in pearls raised her brows but said nothing. Avery folded the napkin, set it aside, and reached for her phone. She tapped slowly, her thumb moving with surgical precision. The audience, the passengers, the viewers, the silent witnesses behind the screen would have expected this to be the moment. The moment where the twist hit Filmar the soul. One call that changes everything moment. But no, this wasn't that. Not yet. Instead, Avery opened a secure app, encrypted messaging, a service most wouldn't recognize unless they worked in law, tech, or upper echelon crisis response. She typed, "Flight 1286 incident documented. Harassment escalating. Please prepare filing. Will advise if removal required upon landing." She hit send. Recipient, K. Harper, ESCO, Civil Rights and Aviation Compliance Attorney. Top tier, ruthless, efficient. This wasn't a flex. It was a strategy. She wasn't going to make a call that would flip the cabin like a movie scene. She was laying legal groundwork, brick by brick. This wasn't just about Tracy. It was about the system that allowed Tracy to believe she could do this, without consequence. She set her phone aside, screen dark, then slowly adjusted in her seat, smoothing her damp clothes. Her movements were precise, almost regal. No outburst, no accusation, and that calm is what made everyone else squirm. Emma reappeared moments later with a dry towel. She handed it quietly to Avery, eyes apologetic. Avery took it with a nod. "Thank you. You shouldn't have to deal with this," Emma said, voice low. Avery didn't answer, just met her eyes, gave her the faintest smile of acknowledgement. Behind them, Tracy stood by the galley, pretending to reorganize glassware. But her eyes flicked to Avery every few seconds, as if waiting for a retaliation that never came. And that unnerved her more than any yelling ever could. David shifted again in his seat, looking increasingly uncomfortable. He wasn't used to being wrong in public, but he didn't yet have the courage to admit it. The woman in pearls looked at Avery, then down at her lap. A small crease of doubt formed on her brow. For the first time, people were wondering, what if she's not who we think she is? What if she doesn't belong here? Because this is too small for her. What if we just insulted someone far, far more powerful than we are? The atmosphere in the first-class cabin had shifted. Heavier now. The earlier tension had mutated into something more volatile, like the stillness before a summer storm snaps into thunder. Tracy stood at the edge of Avery's row, arms crossed, lips tight. Her posture screamed defiance, but her eyes held something more dangerous. Vindication. Avery continued to sit calmly, her slacks still damp from the spill, her expression unreadable. She'd said nothing since Emma brought her the towel. She hadn't complained, hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't needed to. But silence, when composed and deliberate, can be infuriating to those desperate for dominance. "You know," Avery said softly, glancing up at Tracy, "you spill water on me. Ignore every service protocol, then stand there like you're owed an apology. That's quite a display. The words weren't loud. They weren't sarcastic. They were just factual. But that made them cut deeper. Tracy's face twitched. "Excuse me?" "I said," Avery repeated, still even. "If this is what first-class service means to you, I'd hate to see how you treat Coach." The air shifted. Something snapped in Tracy's gaze, no longer restrained by procedure or professionalism. Without warning, without hesitation, she raised her hand and slapped Avery across the face. A crack echoed in the cabin. Sharp. Final. Gasps erupted. One passenger yelped audibly. The woman in pearls clutched her necklace. David half rose from his seat, frozen mid-motion, eyes wide. Emma's hands flew to her mouth, her tray clattering onto the galley counter behind her. Avery didn't react, not at first. She stayed exactly where she was, cheek flushed, the sting fresh. Her hands remained folded on her lap. Slowly, deliberately, she turned her face to meet Tracy's. Her eyes didn't water, but something behind them flared. The room waited. Every breath was held. "You just made a mistake," Avery said, her voice like steel wrapped in velvet. Tracy blinked, realizing, too late, what she'd done. She stepped back slightly, already defensive. "You provoked me," she said. "You were being disruptive." Avery didn't respond. She didn't need to. Emma rushed forward, eyes frantic. "Tracy, what the hell are you doing?" "She disrespected crew authority," Tracy barked, trying to regain footing. "She was hostile." "She wasn't," Emma said, her voice shaking now. "She was sitting here. You hit her." Tracy's jaw locked. "I'll handle this." "You already have," Avery said quietly, still unmoved. "And poorly." David finally stood fully, adjusting his blazer like he wanted to restore order but wasn't sure how. "I think we need the captain," he said, his tone clipped. "Now." Emma nodded, stepping into the cockpit without waiting for orders. A few beats passed in silence, passengers shifting, whispering, eyes darting like spectators in a courtroom. Then the cockpit door opened. The captain stepped out. He was tall, lean, with graying temples and the same tight posture as Tracy. His name tag read, Captain Mason Riley. And when he laid eyes on Tracy, he didn't ask questions. "Tracy," he said, voice low. "What's going on?" Tracy jumped at the chance. "She's been confrontational since boarding, invalid ticket status, refused to move, and now she's disrupting cabin order." Captain Riley's eyes shifted to Avery, then to Emma, then to David. Emma stepped forward. "Sir, that's not true. Miss Johnson showed her ticket. She's assigned to 1A, paid fare. Tracy's been provoking her the whole time." Captain Riley raised a brow. "You're contradicting your lead?" "I'm telling the truth." He glanced at David. "You witnessed this?" David hesitated. Too long. Yes, I saw the altercation. I saw the slap." Captain Riley's jaw tightened. But instead of turning to Tracy, he turned to Avery. "Miss Johnson, I think it would be best for everyone's comfort if you continued the rest of the flight in an alternate seat. We can arrange accommodations at the next stop." Avery blinked once. "Excuse me?" "Given the disturbance," he continued, "we'll have someone escort you to another section, just to de-escalate." David looked confused. "Captain, she was assaulted. And I'll be filing the report," Riley said smoothly. "But for now, we must think of all passengers." Avery stared at him, unmoving, then tilted her head slightly. "Mason Riley," she said, as if testing the weight of the name. "You look familiar." His eyes flickered. A beat passed. "You once pitched a transport logistics startup to my firm," she continued. 4 years ago, we declined." The room tensed. Emma's jaw dropped. Tracy stiffened. Captain Riley didn't blink. "I don't think this is the time." "Oh, I think it's exactly the time," Avery said, her voice calm, but now laced with something else. Power, memory, receipts. "You were in over your head, no supply chain experience, no compliance standards. We passed on your pitch unanimously. You blamed bias, but it was just bad business." Captain Riley's face remained still, but something in his jaw ticked. And you're Tracy's... what? Avery asked, eyes narrowing. Brother-in-law? Tracy's eyes darted between them. Avery leaned back in her seat, still calm. So, no one will save me. Not the passengers, not the crew, not the pilot. She smiled faintly. But that's the beauty of not needing to be saved. She pulled out her phone again, started typing. Captain Riley stepped forward. Miss Johnson, I'm going to have to ask... No, Avery interrupted, standing now. And the moment she stood, she didn't look small. She didn't look like a problem to remove. She looked inevitable. She looked like a verdict waiting to be delivered. You're going to regret this, she said quietly. Captain Riley opened his mouth, but the tone in her voice? It silenced him before he could speak. Avery dabbed the corner of her mouth with a napkin, catching the thin trail of blood that had crept from her lip after the slap. The sting had dulled, but the red on white, that was a record. That was evidence. I didn't start this, she said, her voice low, razor sharp. But I will end it. There was no theatrics in her tone, no raised voice, just certainty. And that, somehow, chilled the air more than any shouting ever could. Tracy scoffed. And what? Your little fantasy of being someone important? Avery said nothing. She sat back down, unlocked her phone, and typed. This time, the message was more detailed. Flight 1286. Incident escalated to physical assault. Crew collusion suspected. Captain conflict of interest confirmed. Request immediate audit and legal documentation retrieval from flight system logs. Begin escalation protocols. Notify ground asset S. Khan. She hit send. Recipient. Harper, legal team +1. Tag. Escalation Tier 2, aviation governance. Tracy watched her with a smirk. You think someone's going to save you now? What? NOACP? Oprah? One of your strong black woman podcasts gonna teleport in and fix this? Avery didn't even blink. David shifted in his seat across the aisle, clearly uncomfortable, but still passive. Emma hovered by the galley, her face pale and fingers clenched around the edge of the metal counter. From behind them, murmurs began again. More fearful now, less judgmental, more wary. They had seen the slap. They had heard Avery speak names, make connections, remain unbroken. And that unbreakable calm? It made them nervous. It suggested something larger was at play, something they didn't understand. Avery stared out the window. Below them, clouds drifted like waves across an invisible ocean. Far below, at a nondescript data center just outside Dallas, a man in a gray hoodie sat in front of 5 screens. Sufyan Khan, aviation systems engineer. Contractor, specialized in back-end security protocols for multiple private charter systems. His phone vibrated. It was a secured push alert, coded green. Priority Tier 2 from a client-side representative labeled only AJ. He tapped the screen, read the short instruction packet embedded in the alert. Begin retrieval, manifest logs, crew assignment history, captain override flag logs, internal cabin cam timestamps, manual triggers only. Sufyan raised an eyebrow. Someone on board had tripped a soft trigger embedded in the aircraft's in-flight system. Not a panic button. Something quieter, designed specifically for situations like this. High-level clients didn't need flight attendants. They needed protection. Invisible. Legal. Impeccably documented. He opened a terminal window. Cross-referenced the aircraft registration. Tail number N9743AJ. He typed a command. Bypassed standard verification using client-given back-end keys. 10 seconds later, a flood of data appeared. Flight logs, internal cabin pings, time-stamped manifest verifications, and the crew file. He clicked on it. First, the pilot, Mason Riley. Last update 6 months ago. Notes. Rejected private equity application, Johnson Strategic Ventures 2019. Flagged for poor risk-to-reward ratio. Sufyan blinked. Well, well. Then the flight lead. Tracy Sullivan connection to Mason Riley. Family by marriage. Complaint history. 3 minor guest service complaints. 1 racial sensitivity training assigned. Completed under supervision. No major flags, but just enough smoke to justify the current fire. Sufyan pulled down the entire interaction log between the cockpit, crew manifest systems, and the auto seating registry. Then he opened a hidden folder and began prepping a certified chain of custody packet. Legal teams would want this, so would the board. Within minutes, encrypted files were syncing to a cloud drive tied to Avery Johnson's corporate command center. Back on the plane, the world was still quiet. But that was about to change. Avery didn't look up when Emma approached. Emma hesitated, swallowing. I've never seen anything like this. Avery finally glanced her way. Yes, you have, she said softly. You've just never seen someone not back down from it. Emma's eyes watered a little. She looked away, ashamed. Tracy, from a few steps away, watched the exchange with growing unease. Something about Avery's steadiness had begun to rattle her. It wasn't just the lack of fear. It was the sense of timing. Avery wasn't reacting like someone caught off guard. She was moving like someone checking boxes, executing a playbook. Tracy returned to the galley and pulled out the passenger list again. Her fingers shook slightly. There had to be a mistake. There had to be some note she missed, some hidden tag, but there wasn't. Just Avery Johnson, 1A, paid first. No asterisk, no special treatment, no warning. Until now. She picked up the intercom handset but hesitated before pressing the button. Her hands were damp. Avery turned to David, who had been pretending to scroll through his email but hadn't turned a page in minutes. Does it feel uncomfortable yet? She asked. David looked up. Excuse me? The moment when the wrong person ends up being the one you underestimated. He sighed. Look, I didn't mean... I know what you meant, she cut in. You meant to stay out of it. Because staying out feels safer than standing up. You meant to be neutral. But that slap, that silence, that's complicity. He didn't answer, because there was no defense. A chime sounded overhead. The seatbelt sign blinked on, though the skies outside remained smooth. Emma's voice came on the speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, we ask that you remain seated. We've received notification from ground operations regarding a technical issue under review. We'll keep you informed. Passengers exchanged glances. Technical issue? There was no turbulence, no warning. And yet, Tracy's phone buzzed. She picked it up, heart skipping. Urgent notice. Review and preserve all crew action logs. Flight flagged for internal audit. Compliance Authority, Johnson Aviation Group. The screen nearly slipped from her hands. Her eyes shot to Avery, who was watching her and smiling, just barely, because now the first domino had fallen. The pilot's voice came over the intercom with a tone that pretended to be calm, but couldn't hide the tightness underneath. Ladies and gentlemen, we've received a directive from ground control to make an unscheduled landing at our secondary destination for procedural review. There's no cause for alarm. Please remain in your seats and keep your seatbelts fastened. Avery looked out the window. The plane hadn't been descending when he said that, but now it was. She could feel it in the subtle shift of pressure, the angle of the aircraft nose. A silent agreement had been reached somewhere far below, and now the sky was closing its fingers around them. Tracy stood frozen in the galley, still holding her phone. Her face was pale, her lips tight. She knew enough about how the system worked to understand that when the words internal audit and Johnson Aviation Group were used in the same sentence, something very serious had been triggered. Still, she straightened her shoulders and walked back into the aisle, playing it off like turbulence. Everyone please stay seated. We'll be landing shortly. This is just a routing issue. Nothing to worry about. But passengers were already exchanging looks. They weren't stupid. They'd heard the tone. They'd felt the shift. David sat rigid in his seat now, eyes darting from Tracy to Avery. Emma glanced down the aisle, then leaned toward Avery's row. What's happening? She asked quietly. Avery didn't look away from the window. Accountability, she said. Tracy passed by again, clutching the seatbacks tighter than necessary. Below, through the window, the outlines of the city came into view. Runways, flashing lights, and something else. A row of emergency vehicles parked along a distant strip of tarmac. Not with sirens, just waiting. And among them, a sleek black SUV with tinted windows. It didn't belong to the airport police. It was something else. Unmarked, silent, strategic. Tracy saw it too. She paused halfway down the aisle, pretending to adjust the curtain between first class and business, but her eyes locked on the SUV. She knew what that car meant. Someone important was waiting, and it wasn't for a routine customs check. She walked faster now, heading to the cockpit, needing reassurance. In the front cabin, Captain Riley was already preparing for descent, sweat collecting at his temple despite the cool air. His fingers danced over the controls with precision, but his mind was somewhere else entirely. On a past meeting room, a rejected investment pitch, a woman who'd calmly dismantled his dream without blinking. Now she sat in 1A, and everything in his gut told him she was orchestrating something massive. Tracy leaned in. "They're waiting," she whispered. "On the ground. SUVs, police, what the hell is happening?" Riley didn't look at her. "They haven't contacted us yet. No boarding directive, just ground presence." She gripped the wall beside him. "Is she doing this?" "I don't know," he lied. Tracy hissed. "She's not even tagged VIP. How is this happening?" "She's not tagged," he murmured, eyes locked on the runway. "Because she owns the tagging system." Outside, wheels screeched softly against the tarmac. The jet taxied toward a far terminal, away from the usual gates. The SUV and police cars didn't approach, just waited. The plane rolled to a stop. No announcement followed, no door opened. A strange silence settled over the cabin like fog. Passengers craned their necks to peer through the windows. "What is this?" someone whispered. "Why aren't they letting us out?" another asked. David leaned toward Emma. "Is there a threat?" Emma shook her head. "We haven't been told anything." Inside the galley, Tracy was unraveling. She paced, checked her phone, peeked through the window again. Still, no one came aboard. But Avery? Avery sat completely still. She hadn't touched her phone again. She hadn't spoken. She didn't have to. The silence was speaking for her now, the type of silence that came just before a verdict. 10 minutes passed, then 15. The tension grew unbearable. Tracy tried to regain control, stepped into the aisle. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're just waiting for clearance. Please stay calm." Her voice was too high, too fast. She was cracking, and Avery watched it all, silent and still. She wasn't lashing out. She was letting them break themselves. Another 5 minutes ticked by. The door stayed closed. The SUV stayed parked. And still, the police didn't move. David leaned closer to Avery, finally speaking. Are you doing this?" Avery turned slowly. "Doing what?" He hesitated. "Orchestrating this." "I'm responding," she said simply. "Responsibility has its own schedule." He swallowed hard. Outside, the sun began to dip low, casting long shadows across the tarmac. The lights from the police cars remained still, quiet blue and red pulses in the distance. Inside, time stretched. Tracy finally slumped into the jump seat by the galley, her arms crossed tight, her foot tapping. Her composure was gone. And Avery? She reached down, took out her phone again, but didn't unlock it. She just placed it face up on the tray table and stared at it, because she knew what Tracy didn't. This wasn't the moment she revealed her power. This was the moment they understood it, and the longer they waited, the more they'd feel the weight of what they didn't know. The stillness inside the aircraft had settled into something heavier than silence, an unspoken countdown. It wasn't about the landing anymore. It wasn't about the spill, or the slap, or the seats. It was about the moment everyone realized they were no longer in control. A chime sounded overhead, sharp and sudden. Captain Riley reached for the cockpit handset just as the cabin phone at the galley rang simultaneously. The timing wasn't coincidental. He picked it up. His face changed. Outside, Tracy stood near the galley, trying to look composed, but her foot tapped uncontrollably against the linoleum. When Emma answered the cabin phone, she stood straighter, voice clipped. This is Emma. A pause. Her eyes widened. She turned, slowly, her gaze locking on Avery's seat. Yes, understood. She hung up without a word. Captain Riley emerged from the cockpit seconds later, his face pale. His voice cracked only slightly as he addressed Tracy in a hushed tone. "We've just received an internal directive from HQ." Tracy stiffened. "And?" "No one is to engage with passenger 1A, he said. "Repeat, do not approach, do not address, do not confront, on direct order." Tracy blinked. "What? From who?" "The board." She laughed nervously. "That doesn't make sense. There's no one that important on this flight." Captain Riley's jaw worked as if to say something else, but he stopped. The way his voice had changed said enough. It wasn't protocol anymore. It was fear. David, who'd been watching carefully from across the aisle, now sat forward. "What the hell's going on?" he asked, louder this time. "Why is the plane grounded? Why are we not allowed to disembark?" Emma looked at him, then at Avery, then back. "You might want to ask her," she said. All eyes turned. Avery didn't flinch. She simply reached for her phone and unlocked it with a soft swipe of her thumb. She opened her email app, scrolled once, then handed it to Emma. Emma read, blinked, then passed it to Captain Riley. His hand trembled as he read. He whispered something under his breath, then backed away a half step, as if from someone radioactive. David stood up now. No, what's going on?" Avery turned her head toward him. Calm, composed. "David Brooks, executive partner at Klein Equity, correct?" He frowned. "How do you know that?" "You submitted a bid to acquire secondary shares in Johnson Aviation last fall." He stared. "That offer was declined," she added. "By me." Tracy's head snapped around. "Wait, what?" Emma looked at the captain. Is that real?" Captain Riley nodded slowly, still stunned. "It's her." Avery stood up, unhurried, adjusting her blazer. Her presence expanded with every breath. "I'm not just a shareholder," she said, her voice now strong, clear, reaching every ear in the cabin. "I'm the majority stakeholder. I hold the controlling interest in this airline." The cabin was dead silent. "I'm also the chairwoman of the board." David sat down without meaning to. He simply collapsed backward, his eyes wide with disbelief. Tracy laughed, sharp, desperate. "That's impossible. There's no way we'd miss something like that." "You didn't miss it," Avery replied. "You ignored it." The woman in pearls down the aisle covered her mouth. The businessman beside her leaned back in his seat, muttering a stunned, "Jesus." Avery continued, her tone now shifting into something commanding, something final. "You see, I've learned over the years that the most dangerous power isn't loud. It's quiet. It walks onto planes wearing nothing flashy. It carries its own bags. It sits down without demanding anything, because it doesn't need permission to exist." She stepped into the aisle, her gaze sweeping across the stunned faces. "Some of you judged me. Silently, out loud. Some of you watched me get slapped and said nothing, because you believed I didn't belong, because you assumed power looked like something else." She turned to Tracy. "But now the silence is yours." Tracy opened her mouth to protest, but Captain Riley stepped between them. "Tracy," he said, low. "It's done." Avery took her phone back from Emma, nodded once, then looked toward the front of the plane. "Disembark the passengers," she said. "We'll begin the formal process immediately." Emma moved to comply. David stood up again, flustered, trying to gather words. "Miss Johnson, You doubted me when it was convenient," she said, not unkindly. "But I won't hold that against you. Just remember the lesson." Tracy was frozen now, pale as paper. Emma walked past her to open the main cabin door. Outside, the SUV doors opened. A woman in a sleek black suit stepped out, flanked by two assistants. They waited patiently as the stairs rolled up to the cabin. "They're here for me," Avery said softly. And with that, she turned to walk to the door. No more announcements, no more warnings. She didn't need to raise her voice, because now the entire plane knew. They hadn't just messed with someone rich. They'd tried to humiliate the woman who owned their future. The cabin was no longer silent. It was stunned. Passengers sat motionless in their seats, their expressions flickering between guilt and disbelief. The same faces that had once whispered judgments now stared at the woman they had misjudged, unsure how to reconcile the version of Avery they'd imagined with the truth standing before them. Emma approached slowly, nervously wringing her hands. "Miss Johnson," she began, voice soft but clear enough for others to hear. I owe you an apology for not stepping in sooner, for not doing more." Avery turned, calm as ever. She studied Emma's face, not looking for fear, but for sincerity. "I saw what was happening," Emma continued, eyes glistening. "I just didn't think I could stop it." Avery nodded once. "Now you know you can." Emma looked down, swallowing emotion. "Thank you." The moment hung in the air, and around them, passengers began shifting in their seats. Not to escape, but to process. David, still seated across the aisle, looked visibly shaken. The woman in pearls turned her gaze away, shame written across her expensive makeup. Even Mr. Whitaker removed his glasses, cleaning them more out of nervousness than necessity. But amid it all, one figure remained unmoved. Tracy. She stood with her arms crossed near the galley, lips tight, eyes narrowed. "Oh, come on," she said aloud, her voice cutting through the air. "So what? You're in charge. Great. But this doesn't change anything. I'll probably get a suspension, maybe a formal warning. HR will handle it. Like always." Gasps fluttered through the cabin at her tone, but Tracy pressed on. "I mean, let's not pretend anyone died here. You got your little revenge. Power trip complete." Captain Riley looked like he wanted to disappear into the cockpit, but he said nothing. Avery slowly turned to face Tracy. She didn't shout. She didn't raise an eyebrow. She just reached into her bag and pulled out a small device, no bigger than a phone. She tapped the screen twice. The screen lit up. Live broadcast. Johnson Aviation Network. Internal. Within seconds, a secure stream activated. The logo of Johnson Aviation appeared, then faded. And then, the footage began. Time-stamped, cabin camera. It showed Tracy standing over Avery's seat. It showed her smirking. It showed the glass tipping, water pouring onto Avery's lap. It showed Tracy stepping back with feigned innocence. The murmurs in the cabin turned to audible reactions. Gasps, sharp inhales. Then, another clip. The slap. Tracy's hand. Avery's face. The crack of it echoing on the audio. Then silence. The stream ran for less than 30 seconds, but its impact was nuclear. Avery held the device for all to see. "This isn't about revenge," she said. "It's about accountability." She turned to Emma. "This footage is being streamed to our compliance board, HR, legal, executive division. Every branch of this airline that oversees hiring, training, and termination is watching right now." Emma nodded slowly, understanding the gravity of it. Tracy tried to speak, but the weight of the footage had crushed the air from her lungs. "You assaulted a passenger," Avery continued. "You falsified your account, you violated service protocol, and you embarrassed this company." Avery turned, this time to Captain Riley. "And you," she said, "enabled it." He looked down, ashamed. "I reviewed your history before this flight even left the tarmac. Your connection to Tracy, your history of disciplinary flags. You've shielded her before, covered complaints, turned a blind eye." Captain Riley didn't deny it, because he couldn't. "Effective immediately," Avery said. "You are suspended pending full investigation." His face drained of color. "You'll be escorted off this flight," she added, "and placed on inactive status until further notice." Gasps swept the cabin again. Tracy blinked, stunned. "Wait, he's suspended too?" Avery turned to her, eyes colder than steel. "You're not special enough to sink alone." Tracy's arrogance cracked, finally. Two security officers from the SUV appeared at the cabin door, stepping inside quietly, but with purpose. One of them nodded toward Avery. "Miss Johnson, orders received." She stepped aside. They approached Tracy first. "You're being removed for assault and procedural violation," one officer said. Tracy's mouth opened, then closed. She didn't fight, didn't speak. She just went quiet. because there was no fight left. Captain Riley followed behind her, led without resistance. Passengers moved aside, watching the walk of shame unfold. And as Tracy passed Avery one final time, she couldn't meet her eyes. Avery didn't smirk, didn't gloat. She just stood, tall and still, letting silence be the sentence. When the door closed behind them, Avery turned back to the cabin. "To those who spoke up, thank you," she said. "To those who didn't, consider what silence costs." She looked to Emma. "And to those who acted with integrity, even quietly, you'll always have a place here." Then she returned to her seat, placed the device back in her bag, and crossed her legs once more. Not in triumph, in restoration. Because this wasn't about power, it was about resetting the standard. The cabin door closed behind Tracy and Captain Riley with a quiet finality, like a courtroom gavel sealing the verdict. A collective breath seemed to release from the passengers as if they had been holding it for the entirety of the flight. Avery remained seated, calm, her posture steady, her gaze fixed forward. But the storm she had unleashed wasn't over. It was just beginning. Emma moved through the aisle, regaining composure as she made a brief announcement to the passengers. "We'll be disembarking shortly. Please remain in your seats until directed. Thank you for your patience." The words were polite, but the tone carried weight. Behind the scenes, Avery's device continued its secure live stream to the Johnson Aviation executive servers. A team of lawyers, board members, compliance officers, and senior HR representatives watched from offices across the country. The footage of the slap, the disregard, the systemic negligence, it had ignited something. In less than 2 hours, the stream had been downloaded, time-stamped, and distributed through official channels. On a private network feed reserved for executive communications, the live counter climbed rapidly, 10.1 million views. Some were employees, others were shareholders, and many were quiet supporters, those in the industry who had seen far too much and said far too little. Avery sat with her hands folded. Then she stood. Emma glanced at her, unsure if she was about to address the cabin again. But Avery walked past the seats and toward the front galley. She pulled out her phone and opened a document titled Dignity Protocol, Phase 1. She pressed record and began to speak. Not to the passengers now, but to the company. The system. "My name is Avery Johnson," she began, her voice calm but firm, as a recording light blinked red. "For years, I invested in this industry knowing one day I would have to disrupt it. Today proved why that disruption is necessary." She paused. "I've authorized an immediate change in our internal conduct policy. Effective now, any employee, regardless of rank or tenure, who engages in discriminatory behavior, whether through speech, action, or systemic manipulation, will be subject to review by an independent ethics council. This will not be performative. This will be enforceable." Her words were clear, final, structured not like a press release, but like law. Emma, standing near the galley, blinked hard, her throat tightening. Avery continued. "I have seen firsthand what happens when systems protect the loudest voices instead of the most just. That changes today, and it won't just be limited to this airline. We will lead by example and force the rest of the sky to follow." With a click, she ended the recording. The file automatically uploaded to the company's internal policy portal. Emma whispered, "They're going to talk about this day for years." Avery looked at her. "That's the point." Elsewhere, thousands of miles away, inside a modest open-floor office in Atlanta, rows of employees worked late into the evening. Phones buzzed, screens refreshed. The internal communications channel of Johnson Aviation exploded with reactions to the stream and Avery's official announcement. One desk, tucked in the corner of the third floor, was silent. At it sat Angela Nguyen, a veteran flight attendant turned trainer, 48 years old, wore her badge with quiet pride. She had trained dozens of crews, filed dozens of internal reports over the years, many ignored, many lost in the machine. But today, she opened her inbox, clicked New Message, and typed, "To Avery.Johnson@hjgovernance.com, subject, Thank you. We've been waiting for this day. Some of us for decades. Whatever you need next, we're with you. Angela. She hesitated a moment before clicking send, then leaned back and let the tears come. Not from sadness, from release, from relief. Back on the plane, the passengers were now standing in preparation for disembarking. But the energy had shifted. Instead of restlessness, there was reverence. A quiet, almost awkward awareness that they'd witnessed something bigger than a travel delay. David stepped beside Avery. I don't expect forgiveness, he said, but I respect what you did here. Avery offered a small nod. Then let that respect live in what you say next time, what you do. I will, he said, meaning it. Passengers began to file out, one by one. Some gave her small nods, others whispered thank yous. One woman simply placed a hand over her heart and walked on. Emma stood near the door. We'll get a new crew up here shortly, she said. They've already dispatched a replacement captain. Avery looked outside. The sky was beginning to darken now, the sun low on the horizon. The black SUV was still there. Her team waited with folders and phones, ready to debrief. But Avery wasn't done yet. She stepped out last. When her feet hit the tarmac, she paused, looked back at the jet, a place where she was meant to be silent, where she'd been expected to disappear. Instead, she had reset the standard. The studio lights were soft but precise, bathing the set in a quiet glow. Cameras rolled. Microphones caught every breath. The world was watching, not out of curiosity anymore, but respect. Avery Johnson sat across from the host of Inside the Industry, one of the most respected programs in aviation and corporate leadership. She wore a tailored navy suit, no jewelry save for a slim silver bracelet, and no makeup beyond what was required by the producers. She didn't need polish. Her presence alone held gravity. Miss Johnson, the host began, leaning forward with a cautious reverence. Your footage from Flight 1286 has been seen by over 30 million people worldwide. The phrase, dignity protocol, is trending. Can you tell us what it really means? Avery didn't blink. It means we stop tolerating what we've normalized for too long. She looked directly at the camera. This isn't about revenge. It's about redesign. I didn't want to humiliate anyone. I wanted to rebuild something stronger, because dignity isn't a perk. It's a baseline. She spoke with the calm of someone who had carried that belief alone for years, and now finally got to say it aloud. The host asked gently, "And how will this policy change things within your airline?" Avery nodded. "We've signed a legally binding initiative across our company called the Dignity Protocol. It protects both customers and staff. If you are a passenger and experience discriminatory treatment, your case goes directly to an independent review board. If you are an employee and report bias or retaliation, you're guaranteed legal representation, not just HR mediation." The screen behind them lit up with a bold logo, Dignity Protocol. Enacted March 18, 2025, the audience, watching at home and online, saw it for what it was. Not a soundbite, but a system shift. The host continued, "You've mentioned this wasn't about one flight. Was there a personal reason you took this step?" Avery exhaled slowly, then nodded. "There was," she said. "I've never shared this publicly, but before I became a majority stakeholder, before the boardrooms and investor meetings, I was a ticketing agent at a regional airport." The host raised his brows in surprise. "I was 25, Avery continued, working the early shift. One morning I asked a man to step out of line to resolve a booking error. He yelled, loud enough for the whole terminal to hear." She paused, swallowed. "He said, 'You people always think you can tell us what to do. This isn't your country, it's ours.'" The studio was dead silent. No supervisor stepped in, no manager filed a report. I was told to let it go because he was a frequent flyer. And I did. I smiled. I said nothing. Her voice didn't break, but her words trembled with memory. That day, I promised myself two things. One, I'd never let someone else be silenced like that under my watch. And two, I would earn enough power that no one could ever ignore my voice again. The host was visibly moved. "And that was the beginning of your plan to buy into the aviation industry?" Avery nodded. "I didn't want to fight from the outside. I wanted to change it from within. Quietly. Strategically. systematically. The camera zoomed in slightly, capturing her expression. Steady, unflinching, and raw. Later that evening, Avery sat in her office, high above the city skyline. Her team debriefed quietly outside, but she remained alone, reviewing messages pouring into her inbox. Among the corporate endorsements, media requests, and internal employee praise, one message stood out. Subject, my apology, from Margaret Kingsley. Seat 2B, Flight 1286. Miss Johnson, I was one of the passengers who made assumptions about you. I laughed when Tracy mocked you. I told my husband you were probably sneaking into first class. I said nothing when she spilled water on you. I've spent days thinking about how wrong I was. I'm sorry, not just for my silence, but for the ease with which I let myself believe the worst. Your grace has changed something in me. Thank you. Avery stared at the message, unmoving. She didn't feel vindicated. She felt weight, because change always costs something. She forwarded the message to her internal comms team, not to display guilt, but to show what real accountability looked like. Quiet, personal, honest. By midnight, the company had rolled out the dignity protocol across 14 divisions. Subcontractors were notified. Partnered airlines were given 90 days to comply or face contract termination. And still, Avery worked. Because she knew this wasn't about her anymore. This was about everyone who had been overlooked, about the countless men and women who had endured that same moment she did at 25 years old, and who had no microphone, no boardroom, no voice loud enough to rise above the din of just let it go. Somewhere, in a small airport cafeteria, a group of employees gathered around a screen, watching Avery's interview on replay. A new agent, barely out of training, whispered, "She was one of us?" A supervisor nodded. "She still is." The young agent looked thoughtful. "You think she'll really change things?" The supervisor smiled. "She already has." The soft ding of an incoming email lit up Emma Collins's phone screen as she sat on the edge of her bed, legs curled beneath her. She'd barely slept the past few days, not out of stress, but from the rush of change that had crashed into her life since Flight 1286. She rubbed her eyes, still in her uniform shirt, unbuttoned at the collar, hair in a messy bun. The world had turned upside down in the span of a single shift, and her name, once unknown, had begun showing up in hashtags, media blurbs, and company message boards. She tapped the email open. Subject, internal promotion notice, confidential, from Office of the Chairwoman, Johnson Aviation. She blinked, then read, "Dear Emma Collins, based on your professionalism, courage, and unwavering integrity during the incident on Flight 1286, Johnson Aviation is honored to offer you the position of Manager of First-Class Customer Service Operations, effective immediately. Your leadership is the embodiment of the new values we are building. Please report to the Executive Suite at 9 a.m. tomorrow. This promotion is personally approved and signed by Chairwoman Avery Johnson." Emma dropped the phone onto the bed, stared, then covered her mouth, overwhelmed. Tears welled up, not from shock, but from something deeper, something long buried. She stood up, walking slowly to the framed photo on her dresser, a black and white picture of a woman in an old-fashioned flight attendant uniform, smiling, hand on her hip, hair perfectly rolled. Her mother. Her name was Lillian Collins, and 20 years ago, she had been fired from the same airline, long before it became Johnson Aviation. The reason? She had reported a senior pilot for racially discriminatory remarks toward a family and economy class. Back then, HR hadn't called it discrimination. They called it miscommunication. They didn't silence Lillian. They erased her. Emma had grown up watching her mother quietly suffer from that injustice. She never reapplied, never fought the termination. But Emma had. Every day since she entered flight training school, she'd fought it, in her own way, silently, steadily, carefully. Now, this. The next morning, the elevator doors opened to the top floor of Johnson Aviation's headquarters. It was sleek, quiet, with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the city skyline. Emma stepped out, nervously straightening her blazer. A receptionist smiled. "Miss Collins, they're expecting you." She was led down a glass hallway to a private office. Inside, Avery stood behind a desk. Not imposing, just present. She wore a light gray suit today, hair pulled back in a low chignon. Papers were neatly stacked on one side. A digital screen displayed a live tracker of Dignity Protocol implementation metrics. But it was Avery's eyes that caught Emma's attention. Warm, alert, focused. "Emma," she said, "come in." Emma stepped forward. "Miss Johnson, thank you. I didn't expect—" "I did," Avery said simply. She handed Emma a leather folder. Inside was the official promotion letter, her new badge, and a certificate signed with Avery's signature. "I read your file," Avery continued. "Not just the incident report. Your whole file. You've received praise from every passenger service manager you've worked with. You de-escalate tension with empathy. You listen. You lead." Emma blinked, fighting emotion. "I'm not just offering you a position," Avery said. "I'm offering you a responsibility to help us build a first-class experience that treats dignity like a policy, not a perk." Emma nodded quickly. "Yes, absolutely. I won't let you down." Avery smiled, then gestured for her to sit. There was a pause. Then Emma cleared her throat. "Can I tell you something?" Avery leaned forward. "Of course." Emma opened the side of her bag and pulled out the black and white photo of her mother. She placed it on the desk. She worked for this airline 2 decades ago, before the buyout, before the rebrand. Her name was Lillian Collins. She was extraordinary. Avery studied the photo, her expression softening. She was fired for filing a bias complaint. They erased her like she didn't matter. "I remember that name," Avery said quietly. "I came across a redacted case file when reviewing legacy HR records during my acquisition process. It was marked closed due to lack of documentation. But even then, it didn't sit right." Emma's voice caught. "She never talked about it, but I knew it changed her. I promised myself I'd carry that name back into these halls someday, with honor." "You just did," Avery replied. She stood, walked around the desk, and handed the photo back. "Your mother wasn't erased," she said. "She was delayed, and now her legacy gets to fly again, through you." Tears slipped down Emma's cheeks. She wiped them quickly, nodding, unable to speak. Avery placed a pin in her hand. A gold-winged insignia engraved with the words, "Dignity in Flight." "This isn't standard issue," she said. "This is the first one. It's yours." Later that week, Emma stood at the front of a first-class cabin, not as an attendant, but as a supervisor. She wore a new badge, a new uniform, and a quiet confidence that had nothing to do with titles. As passengers boarded, she greeted them with warmth, authority, and ease. No one questioned her. No one dismissed her. Behind her, another attendant whispered, "That's Emma Collins. She's the one from that flight." Passengers nodded in recognition, not because of a scandal, but because of what she'd become. Far above them, in Avery's office, the new plaque on the wall read, "Service isn't just what we do, it's how we see people. Lillian Collins, because some names deserve to rise again, and some wings are earned twice, once in silence and once in justice." The hum of the engines was soft and steady, a low lull beneath the quiet luxury of first class. Avery Johnson sat near the window, seat 2A, sipping a glass of still water. The air was calm, the crew efficient, the atmosphere flawlessly professional. But this time, there were no stares, no murmurs, no double takes. A young attendant stepped forward, offering a genuine smile. "Welcome back, Miss Johnson," she said, handing over a fresh hot towel with practiced ease. "Let me know if there's anything I can do to make your flight more comfortable." Avery returned the smile. "Thank you. Everything's perfect." And it was. Not just the champagne chilled to the right degree or the leather seats, though those helped. It was the absence of fear, the absence of judgment, the quiet acknowledgement that her presence no longer triggered scrutiny, but respect. She leaned back slightly, exhaled, and turned her gaze out the window. The sky was blue, clean, endless. Yet as she watched the clouds blur past at 30,000 feet, her mind pulled back, not to victory, but to the sting that had started it all. The slap. She could still feel it if she focused hard enough. Not the physical pain, but the sound, the echo of it. And worse, the silence that had followed. The way the other passengers had looked away. The way the crew had hesitated. The way the system had chosen quiet over justice. That silence had hurt more than the slap ever could. But now that silence had been shattered. The dignity protocol had been enacted in full across Johnson Aviation. Emma was thriving in her new role. Customer satisfaction was up. Employee morale was climbing. Internal reports of bias were no longer buried. They were met with consequence and reform. The boardroom had changed too, and Avery had become more than just chairwoman. She had become a symbol, quietly, resolutely, and without ever raising her voice. She sipped her water again. The man across the aisle glanced her way with casual politeness, then returned to his e-reader. No tension, no assumptions. She was just another passenger now. And that, oddly, was the greatest reward. The flight was smooth, efficient, just the way she liked it. A few hours in, as the sun dipped on the horizon, painting the clouds gold and crimson, Avery pulled out her phone to review her schedule. Meetings, budget approvals, another press request from a women in leadership panel. Standard, until she saw it. An email, subject line flagged as priority, confidential opportunity. She opened it. To Avery Johnson. From Executive Recruitment, Altus Global Airlines. Subject, Strategic Leadership Invitation, CEO Role Consideration. Dear Ms. Johnson, on behalf of the Altus Global Board of Directors, we extend our sincere admiration for your leadership and transformation of Johnson Aviation. As part of a new initiative to reshape international service standards, we are launching a full-scale restructure of our operations, beginning with cultural reform and service equity. We believe you are uniquely positioned to lead this mission. Should you be open to discussing the CEO role for Altus Global, we are prepared to offer full operational freedom, immediate board access, and long-term equity stake. This is more than a position, it's a platform. We hope you'll consider helping us change not just the flight experience, but the entire sky. Avery stared at the screen. For a long moment, she said nothing, moved nothing. Her reflection in the window caught the slight upturn of her lips. This wasn't flattery. This was recognition. Her mind flicked to that moment, standing on that plane, soaked and slapped, told she didn't belong. And now, the same industry that once tried to erase her was asking her to rebuild it, from the top. She didn't reply right away. She closed the email and stared out the window again, this time not in memory, but in vision. She imagined terminals where agents were empowered to speak up, cabins where flight attendants were trained not just in service, but in empathy, pilots who knew that silence would no longer be protection, and passengers who saw dignity not as a privilege, but a promise. The plane banked slightly, shifting toward its final descent. The captain's voice came over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be landing shortly. On behalf of Johnson Aviation, thank you for flying with us. We hope your journey was smooth and respectful. Avery smiled. That wasn't just a slogan anymore. It was a standard. As the wheels touched down, she braced, not for impact, but for the next chapter. Her assistant would greet her at the gate. The board would want her opinion on the merger proposal. A reporter had asked for comment on the FAA's interest in replicating dignity protocol for national carriers. But those weren't the thoughts holding her attention. What held her now was the possibility that what began as a response to injustice could become the blueprint for transformation. She stood, gathered her bag, nodded at the crew, and exited the cabin as another attendant said softly, "Thank you, Ms. Johnson. You've made all of our jobs matter more." Avery paused, met her eyes, and for the first time in years, said something she hadn't allowed herself to believe fully until now. "You're welcome." Outside, the air was crisp. A private car waited. Her team stood ready, but as Avery approached, Her phone buzzed once more. A message from her lead advisor. We ran the numbers. Altus Global is a mess. But with you, it's a legacy opportunity. Let me know. The sky's not the limit anymore. It's just your starting point. Avery looked out across the horizon. She didn't answer. Not yet. Because the real victory was knowing she could choose when and how the sky changed next.